This is Dr. Home and the Reverend Lang Lim, Pandamix, Healing Conversations in Between Times. In the last episode, we talked about the concept of the loyal soldier. The loyal soldier is the part of us that developed when we were young as a way for us to survive. And I shared my own experience of growing up with a loyal soldier. And so in this conversation, we're going to deepen that conversation and further explore the healing at the personal dimension. Okay? Please take a breath with us. As you listen, I invite you to feel your body, feel your feet on the ground, allowing the body to be settled and also at the same time fully engaged in this dialogue. So Lang, what is your perspective and your experience of loyal soldier?
Oh, I think I have a whole loyal army. So your wounding came from an actual war, and your father being absent, and you taking on the responsibility of being an 80-year-old father. When I think of my own childhood, and certainly, my family wasn't perfect, and but I think what I want to talk about actually is to open up a conversation about the environment. And mine wasn't a war. As I have thought about this over the years, I think mine is really about having lived in waters that I thought were clean and good, but was in fact poisoned.
Toxic environment.
Toxic water.
Toxic culture, toxic environment.
More than that, I want to hold this metaphor that we are all fishes living in waters. The waters is your culture, is your family, is your national culture and belief system, the invisible part that you cannot see. Because sometimes culture can be seen, right? Like, the kind of holidays that you take. But I mean the invisible belief and value system of what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is not, what is godly or holy and what is defiled and evil, that runs us, the poisoned waters. Maybe another way to think about it is the MS-DOS, the iOS system, the software in my own soul and the programming. And that the healing comes from being able to see the waters one lives in, or being able to kind of look back into one's inside and say, wow, this was the programming, and this programming is not working. Does that make sense?
Maybe you can share your own experience of what it's like to grow up in that water, and then the realization of the toxicity of that. Share in a
Sure.
memory or...
Yeah. So mine was a very specific growing up situation where I, on my own, voluntarily, wholeheartedly, became a Christian. And between the ages of 12 to 14, it was very formative. I had read a tract, I had received Jesus into my heart. I had gone to an evangelical rally in Singapore, a charismatic rally where people spoke in tongues. I was new to all of this. My parents were not Christians. And in encountering this, a part of it was incredibly real and true, and still is real and true. That the way today that I know of the sacred dimension or the divine realm, and today I think of Buddhist, Christian, Hindu as all different ways of knowing the divine. For me, that which still speaks to me most is Jesus and Christ. It's sort of like that's the way my heart is unlocked to relate to the sacred and to God that comes in many, many different names.
Actually also to your own body and your life experience.
And that my body too is also holy and sacred and part of the divine. But the language that both opens up my heart is the Christian message. So I grew up with that, and grew up not meaning someone told me. I sought after that. It was a living, still is a living relationship. Being in the charismatic movement part of the Christian church was to enter into ecstatic singing and to speak in tongues. And I had an experience of my body aflame. Of course, years later, I understood different religions and different cultures have the same phenomenon too. The Hindus call it a Kundalini experience. Now, I already know that some Christians listening to this is going to say, that's not of God, that's of the devil. Some ways to not only disparage and judge, but to completely denigrate it and turn it around. So then, and I didn't know it then, but Christianity is Jesus, and then there's the Imperium Church, this dogmatic framework that then tells you what is right and not right, what is good and not good. And I was already plunged into that controversy. The controversies that I didn't know was a controversy, but that my innocent teenage child absorbed was to also become very deeply suspicious and critical and hateful even of my own lived reality, to doubt that. And when you're a teenager, what you doubt most is the emerging feelings of sexuality and of desiring, where both love and sex are kind of intertwined, and that's intertwined for all of us. To look at all of that and think this is sinful, this is wrong.
The sexuality, and then also your awareness that you're gay.
I think above all it was just a sexuality first. Then the gay part was a wallop. In fact, in the early days I thought I was fine because I was not lusting after girls. And that was the whole teaching. So I thought I was great. Until I then realized, oh, this is even worse, because and I think some listeners relate to this who have come from these kinds of fundamentalist background, where any kind of sexual arousal, bodily arousal, was wrong. Masturbation was not just wrong; it was feeling horrified with yourself, with myself, that somehow I had murdered these millions of sperm. And I know some people listening to this are going to laugh. How could it be so ridiculous? But there are others who really understand what I'm talking about. And what we are talking about here is, in this case, culture. And I don't mean Singapore culture because it wasn't Christian. I mean what we then, from our soul place, receive from people or institutions or family or books, and say, give it to me, this is real. And you take it all on board, because the soul is innocent, and it's taken all on board, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work with answering the reality of who I am, of who we are. And you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. This part is very damaging.
What I'm hearing that it didn't work because whatever you were taught or told to believe sounds to me, at some point you realized these are lies. Lies from the adults, and then lies from the institutions, and then lies from the culture. And so I think that's part of the wounding, I imagine.
To wake up and realize that one has been lied to, yes. And it takes a period of time to use that word. I think initially I thought, oh, they're being hypocritical. you see these sexual scandals that pastors get into. And hypocritical, I thought they were being hypocritical, but hypocrisy is that, oh, they're not doing it, But lie is different. Lie is, this is not possible at all, but they keep on telling you that this is possible, that celibacy is better than any kind of sexuality. That yes, it is possible to not masturbate, that it is possible to find that one person that you have sex with and that will be it for the rest of your life. Hypocrisy would be that is possible and you're not doing it and you fall short. That's why you see these folks, repenting and saying mea culpa and I'll do better. Actually, the lie is, this is just a wrong map entirely. This is unmoored from the actual reality of what sexuality is and what spirituality is.
So,
which is that both are deeply mysterious, sacred, come from the same source, diverges into two different streams, as my friend Michael Kelly says. And that when we are in touch with one or the other, we experience God. My first sexual experience, in my mid-20s in seminary, initially it was, this is terrible, I'm doing something wrong, and one has this conflict with oneself. And then in the end, no, what is the data point? The data point at this moment is this is beautiful. This is holy, this is good, and this heals, this moment of being touched and connected, in my case, to another man. And I know that heterosexuals connected to someone of the opposite sex, and not just feeling, knowing. It's a knowing in the body. This is real, this is good, this is beautiful, this is godly. And to hear oneself saying that for the first time with this earned knowing is then to know that what one had received so innocently actually had been a lie. And then that is painful too, because it also means the next stage of breaking with the community or the dogma that had given oneself, that had given me so much meaning.
Yes. So I'm curious for the viewers who are listening in, and I could imagine that you are not alone in experiencing this, that many people, depends on what traditions or family religious background, some people would experience something very similar to what you're saying. So the question I have is, so here's the painful experience of being lied to, being betrayed, being harmed and hurt. How does one recover oneself? How does one heal from that experience? And you can share it from your own experience. What did it take for you to heal? And I imagine healing is a continual process even now.
I think the process of healing is to then know that that first thing with which one had received with such innocence and unquestioned belief. In my case, it was this fundamentalist Christianity. In other cases, it could be something political. For example, my aunts in China had believed Mao was a god, and then to be disillusioned by that.
Or someone in the U.S. believe in Ayn Rand and would.
Or in American exceptionalism, for example, we know of U.S. veterans that signed up for war in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, and have now come back. And part of it is not just the wounding from actually being physically shot at, but to know that there were no weapons of mass destruction and they were lied to, and they had given up the best years of their lives and their actual bodies to fight in a war that was made the reason for that was made up. So it is that first stage of having innocence shattered, And that could be you were a communist, you were a capitalist, you were an American. It could be believing something in your father or your mother. Then, in that shattering, one is cast out into the wilderness, in exile, as it were. And so then when one is exiled, in the Bible, the temple was destroyed and the Jews were cast into exile. So you're wandering around now in this desert place. And then for me, the struggle then was, did I make up all of my experiences of the Christ and of being loved by God? Was that just chemicals in my brain? Do I now become a complete skeptic and throw it away?
So you second-guessed your own.
A deep second guessing. Yeah, that was the first second guessing, and then now the second guessing. And the whole my world was turned upside down. When you did Vipassana meditation and I then followed suit, it came at a time in which I could not pray in the traditional Christian way. Everything had dried up. So I took on this Buddhist meditation practice. Which, interestingly enough, when I let myself have that and found my mind calming down and coming out of meditation, all that was restored to me was, no, this is the same feeling of wholeness I had. A different taste, a different flavor, but still food. I'm still being nourished. And so I could tell, okay, this is the deep thread of truth that I'm now experiencing by another name now. And to then discern what is not true. And the other part of it was to keep on wrestling with this, and also wrestling through the mind as well. So it's not just the heart and the body that knows. The mind also needs to know. So one of the Christian sayings says that faith is the mind seeking understanding, as understanding of an experience. So we are continually seeking understanding. But not an understanding in which it's a Sunday school, you're told this and you just believe it without question.
So it's not blind beliefs or blind faith, but through your own wrestling.
My own questing.
Your own questing.
And I think that my own questing, and so my own questing back to the whole sexual question was in seminary at Harvard to read St. Augustine, his Confessions. He was an early Christian saint in the 4th century. He was the one that came out with this notion of the fall, that when Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, they were cast out of Eden, and that was the fall. Humanity had fallen, and from that time, it was all bad. We may have been created good, but after the fall, we all were born bad and damaged. And for him, that damage had to do with sexuality. In fact, for him, the sign of damage is de-erection, because the body is not under our control. It's a sign of our spiritual rebellion against God. Well, then I read his biographies, and when he was 16 years old, his father brought him to a public bathhouse, and he had an erection. And his father was delighted that here was his virile 16-year-old son. But Augustine felt incredibly humiliated by all of it.
So what is the point of this story?
Well, so then out of his own, youthful insecurity, he came up with a theology that erections, bodily desires, sexual desires was bad, because he later converted and became a Christian in his 30s. And you read his writings, and he's talking, he's making meaning out of his past, and he's saying this is terrible. But then the Christian church inherited that, and as blind faith. so that for the next 1600 years, it becomes impossible to question this doctrine, this dogma.
So would you say, as a younger boy, young man, you bought into it?
I didn't even know St. Augustine. I just bought into whatever had been passed down.
And then at some point you come to the realization that that is not true based on your own experience. But then the pain, I imagine.
Well, so let's be careful with the true and not true, because I want to show what wrestling is like. Because then when I discovered Augustine had done that, then I understood, okay, this is where the Christian church had gone astray. This is why we have praised celibacy and even the early Christian saints that said, when you have sex, you should do it and have no pleasure. So take no pleasure in the orgasm, but it's necessary to have children. That it would be very easy for one to then say, this whole thing is bullshit, then let go of it, then everything with your body goes. But I'm saying that we honor the struggle. So when I read St. Augustine, then I actually came from a place of saying, oh, but here was a man who was trying to make sense of his early experiences, and he really could not control his sexual desires, and he had many affairs. So in that context, that was what he was doing, and it made sense for him to say that he needed to cool his sexual passions, and that would be true for other people who need that. But other people don't need that. So I'm saying that we come out of innocence into this place of wrestling, and then we come to another third stage of belief. But in that place of belief, it's a second innocence. It's a second innocence. It comes from then really discerning what works for you, what works for me, and hearing your story of what also works for you, and being in this conversation so that we tease out the strands of truth that is beautiful and good and holy and that is complex, but also firm, valid, that we can then use in our own lives, and then come back again to share. This is what I've discovered. Is this what you have discovered? And this can be sexuality, it can be relationship, it can be how we relate to our country, for example.
So what I'm hearing from what you're saying, and I must admit that there's a part of me have a hard time relating to the teaching of St. Augustine, because I didn't grow up with that, and sexuality has always been something to celebrate and to enjoy and not to be fearful and ashamed of. So I admit that it's hard for me to relate. And what I can relate to is the kind of wrestling that you have to do with understanding what is truth.
Yes.
What is truth, not only from what you have been told, but truth based on your own experiment, your own experience, your own reflection, and then also your own inquiry, your own quest of being in dialogue with yourself, with others. And so at somewhere along here, I wonder, how do you tie this back to the conversation about loyal soldier?
Yes, so good. So I have a loyal soldier that is, I think, tenacious for truth, and understands that truth cannot be locked and captured, because that becomes dogma and fundamentalism. And then at the same time, it's also not airy-fairy and it's like whatever goes, you know. It has to work. There's a feeling into it. There's a thinking into it. And there is also a relating into it. And so my loyal soldier, in a sense, I would say the war is not over, just because all the time we live in a world of illusions and then outright lies, where people and institutions are feeding us a message that is made up or conspiratorial, or actually really doesn't work, or that's actually unmoored from reality. Including my reality or your reality, some of the conspiracy theories that's going on. And so it's to I think what I have is an inner gymnast, continually strengthening the muscle, knowing to trust myself and when to trust others, when to open up for skepticism, when to be humble. And more than anything else, the knowing of actually really what love feels like. If there's one thing I can say, what love feels like, what being healed and settled feels like in my body, with other bodies, in my spirit with other spirits, in my mind with other minds. This settling is trustworthy.
Oh, please take a breath with us. What I'm getting from what you're sharing, Ling, is the importance of using your body, the intelligence of your own body, and then also use your intellect as a way to wrestle with what is truth, and to be vigorous and rigorous.
Yes.
And to be in conversation.
Vigorous and rigorous. And from you, to be kind. So you've taught
Yeah,
me.
I think we need both. We need
vigor, rigor,
honesty and integrity, and we also need compassion and forgiveness. So please take a breath with us. Thank you for listening and watching. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode. For now, be well.
Please join us next time.